So I will call us to order in open session and begin with a motion to rise and report from the closed session. Trustee Cameron, would you move that, please?
I will. Yes, sir.
Thank you. All in favor? Okay, we've risen and reported. Number 4 is the acknowledgement of traditional lands, and I have a disclaimer, and that is that I do not find myself presently on the traditional lands of the Mississaugas. One of the things that I've learned is that it isn't just all right to personalize the acknowledgement. In fact, it's encouraged. So I will tell you, first of all, that I acknowledge that I find myself on the traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq. And in fact, just over my shoulder to the right is the Lennox Island Reserve. On behalf of the rest of us, we acknowledge that we are on the treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We are grateful to the Mississaugas as the caretakers of this land and recognize the benefits we receive from it as we live, work, and play. We also acknowledge and give thanks to the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples who have walked before us. This land continues to be home for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, many of whom are students and workers in Peel schools. We are treaty people. Treaty 13A is a promise to protect and share the land. As we all benefit, we must remember that we borrow land from future generations. We will move now to the approval of the agenda. Trustee Davies, will you move approval of the agenda?
I will, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Is there anyone who will declare a conflict of interest? Seeing none, we move to number 7 on our agenda, beginning with 7.1, which is the report of STOPR, the Student Transportation Appeal Region minutes of April 22nd, long past, and I will note that this has already been approved by the Governance Committee. So who will speak to this? Controller Chung, I assume? Doesn't need to speak to it. Is there anybody who has a question about the minutes? May I, just before seeking approval, acknowledge the change in bell times at a number of schools. I don't know whether everybody caught that, but I know that a number of trustees have been under pressure over the years to advocate for bell change times, and it hasn't always been easy. And I know in the case of Ellengale School, which is on there, it took 3 years, but we're finally there. And I'd like to acknowledge the work in rearranging all the things that go into that. Trustee Lawton, would you move approval of the STOPR minutes then?
I will.
Receipt, I should say. Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Moving to 7.2, the minutes of the Physical Planning, Finance, and Building Committee meeting of June the 1st. Are there any questions, comments, or corrections on those minutes? Trustee Sohi, would you move those, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All in favor? Carried. We move now to the delegation, which I will remind trustees is due to accommodation going to be delivered not by Mr. Sid Knowles, but in fact his notes will be read by Controller Wright, and I will turn now to Mr. Wright.
Thank you, Chair Crocker, and good evening. Chair Crocker, as you've said, I'm advised that the delegate, Sid Knowles, is unable to attend the meeting tonight virtually, and as such has requested that his submission be read into the record. But before I commence, I would just wish to clarify the nature of my presentation of Mr. Knowles' delegation. The submission that I'm about to read is the opinion of the delegate only and does not reflect the opinion of the Peel District School Board. Any views or opinions represented in the following submission are personal to the delegate and belong solely to the delegate and do not represent the views or opinions of the Peel District School Board. And reading the submission is not an endorsement by the Peel District School Board. All statements made in the submission are those of the delegate alone, and they are being read due to the fact the delegate required accommodation and could not attend the meeting himself. The submission is the sole responsibility of the delegate and was written by the delegate and is his own personal opinion. Having said that, I'll commence with the title, and it begins with the Peel District School Board didn't do its due diligence, but it still can do the right thing. The International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, adopted by the United Nations in 1965, states, quote, "There is no justification for racial discrimination in theory or in practice anywhere," end quote. "The existence of racial barriers is repugnant to the ideals of any human society." The convention forcefully set out the United Nations position against discrimination and the apartheid regime of South Africa that practiced it. The Covenant on Civil and Political Rights in Articles 26 and 4 prohibits any discrimination based on race, color, national or social origin, even in times of public emergency, which threatens the life of the nation. Even if your country is falling apart, racial discrimination is prohibited. That Stephen Lewis, as a UN ambassador from 1984 to 1988, would be, or even could be, ignorant of the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination is beyond belief. Yet, in his 1992 Stephen Lewis report on race relations in Ontario, Lewis not only ignored these UN human rights instruments, but he also called for their violation. So why is a Peel District School Board named after this human rights violator? The Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, total prohibition on any discrimination based on race, did not stop Lewis from calling for the implementation of racially discriminatory admission standards at Ontario universities, faculties of education in the aftermath of the Yonge Street riots, in which storefronts were smashed, merchandise grabbed, and 2 police horses injured, 1 serious, 1 minor. 1 serious injury to a horse, and Lewis chucked international human rights law prohibiting racial discrimination out the window. The horse recovered. Human rights in Ontario did not. While, quote, "there is no justification for racial discrimination in theory or in practice anywhere," Stephen Lewis did not need a legal or moral justification to call for illegal discriminatory practices which favored some groups and restricted others because of their race, color, and national or social origin. And while, quote, "the existence of racial barriers is repugnant to the ideals of any human society," that's what Lewis's repugnant report called for. So why is a school named after a man who wrote a racist report? The Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination states, quote, "the term racial discrimination shall mean any distinction, exclusion, restriction, or preference based on race, color, descent, or national or ethnic origin, which has the purpose or effect of nullifying or impairing the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise on an equal footing of human rights and fundamental freedoms in the political, economic, social, cultural, or any other field of public life." And there is no doubt that the discrimination Lewis called for in his report, the exclusion, restriction, preference, and distinction on the grounds of race, meets this definition. Nelson Mandela said, quote, "to deny people of their human rights is to challenge their very humanity." But denying people their human rights and challenging their humanity is what Stephen Lewis did. If Sir John A. Macdonald violated the natural rights of tens of thousands of Indigenous people during his lifetime, then Stephen Lewis violated and caused the violation of the human rights of hundreds of thousands more, and Lewis cannot, unlike MacDonald, claim that his intentions were honorable. Lewis, as a former ambassador to the United Nations, by publicly calling for the violation of international human rights instruments in Ontario, weakened human rights protections around the world. Rest assured that human rights violating countries, such as China, that monitor human rights compliance of other states, have the loathsome Lewis report in their files. The question to be answered by the Peel District School Board is why a school named after a man with such racially repugnant ideas, so repugnant that Lewis violates a UN convention that was written to oppose South Africa's apartheid system. Sir John A. Macdonald's shortcomings, judged by today's standards, are easily seen, but Macdonald was a man of his age. Stephen Lewis's age includes human rights as proclaimed and protected by the United Nations, but the Peel District School Board judges Macdonald harshly and refuses to judge Lewis at all. Why the double standard? Human rights and freedoms as proclaimed by the United Nations are a birthright of every student at Peel District School Board schools. But the Peel District School Board does not provide a human rights education for its students, and this lack of human rights education protects Stephen Lewis. Nelson Mandela also said that, quote, education is the most powerful weapon you can choose to change the world. But Peel District School Board students are denied a human rights education, which is not the way to change the world for the better. And the ignoring of human rights education at Peel schools can be tied to Lewis's repugnant and racist report and the indefensible decision of the Peel District School Board to name a school after a human rights violator. Nelson Mandela deserves to have a Peel District School Board school named after him. Stephen Lewis does not. Louise Arbour, a former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, also deserves to have a Peel District School Board school named after her. Stephen Lewis does not. Basic human decency requires a name change for the school in question. Hold Lewis to the same standard that MacDonald was judged by and rename the school. Does Lewis's bizarre and outdated, nonsensical, socialist-inspired collectivist beliefs protect him from being judged on the same standards as everyone else? If a standard protects Lewis, it should also protect China's vile treatment of the Uyghurs. According to the United Nations, all primary and secondary students should be taught human rights. Clearly, the Peel District School Board has chosen to de-emphasize and ignore human rights, to eliminate human rights from the education process, and to impair and damage the human rights education of its students by allowing a school to be named after a human rights violator whose repugnant ideas and words are in the public record. It's a given that if Peel's students were provided with a human rights education, it would only be a matter of time before these students realized that Stephen Lewis should not have a school named after him. So why does the Peel District School Board defend the indefensible? Note, the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights in Article 26 prohibits discrimination on the grounds of, quote, race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or status. The United Nations did not discriminate against Stephen Lewis for his anti-democratic, collectivist political beliefs or his repugnant and discriminatory racial opinions when Lewis worked in various capacities at the UN after he wrote his report. Lewis was not discriminated against by the UN, but he called for, probably to the cheers of China and other human rights violating states, discrimination against others strictly based on race, color, and national or social origin. Let's correct the mistake of the Peel District School Board of naming a school after Stephen Lewis, a racist individual. For those mostly left-wing NDP supporters who claim that Lewis did some good things, let me say, so did Sir John A. Macdonald, but that never played a part in that Peel District School Board decision. Sid Knowles. If I may, Mr. Chair, there's also a footnote I'll read for the record simply because it's part of the delegation.
How
Human
long?
rights, just it's
Mr. Wright,
a sentence, a sentence.
Okay.
A human rights defender is defined by the United Nations as an individual or group that promotes and strives for the protection and realization of human rights and fundamental freedoms at the national and international level. UN Declaration on the Rights and Responsibility of Individuals, Groups, and Organs of Society to protect universally recognized human rights and fundamental freedoms. Become a human rights defender. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Wright, for your patience and forbearance in agreeing to do this. Ms. Lockyer, normally we would ask for questions of clarification. Clearly, that's not appropriate here tonight since Mr. Knowles is not here. My inclination here is not to ask for somebody to move receipt of this. I will, as chair, simply acknowledge that Mr. Knowles' notes were delivered as asked through an accommodation by Controller Wright.
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving along then to agenda item number 9, staff reports. 9.1 is the report on tenders. Malala Yousafzai, Public School. Mr. Wright, please.
Yes, the recommendation is a good one, and it's certainly good news, Mr. Chair. It would recommend the approval of the construction contract for the construction of said school to Quad Pro Construction in the amount of $29,719,000, including HST. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Are there questions on the report on tenders? I see no questions then. I will call for receipt of this one. So Trustee Davies, please, will you move receipt?
With honor, Mr. Chair, let's get some shovels on the ground.
Let's get some shovels in the ground indeed. Thank you very much. All in favor? That is carried. It's a good news story and we love those. The application status update is something that trustees love to find their names in. Ms. Hanson, are you delivering that report?
For you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I am.
Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. How was your summer?
Oh, is it over?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I will now provide an update on development applications received and planning policy reviews conducted for the months of May, June, and July. Since our last meeting, planning staff did receive a steady flow of low, medium, and high density residential development applications. For the month of May, approximately 1,423 apartment units and 247 townhouse units and 2 single-family detached units were proposed throughout Caledon, Brampton, and Mississauga, where most intensification will be filling in 545 apartment units just east of the Cedar Mills community in Caledon, fronting onto Highway 50 and adjacent to the Humber Valley Heritage Trail Junction. So for the month of May, elementary and secondary student yields continued to increase steadily based on residential development approvals. In terms of policy reviews, planning staff reviewed and provided comments on the Town of Caledon's Bolton Downtown Revitalization Plan, which did propose a zoning bylaw amendment to establish a special policy area known as the Bolton Core Overlay Zone Area. For the month of June, Brampton leads on the significant amount of proposed apartments, coming in at 2,443 units. Most units will be filled within the Shoppers World Community Node. Lands within this node are located within the Hurontario-Maine Corridor Secondary Plan and proposes 2 37-story apartment buildings and a 26-story apartment building with 3 blocks of stacked townhouse units. So we have significant student accommodation pressures for this location and growth area. In terms of policy reviews for the month of June, the City of Brampton's city-initiated official plan amendment to the Credit Valley Secondary Plan Area 45 was reviewed and commented on. Last but not least, for the month of July, again, we see a steady flow of low to medium and high density residential development applications, withholding provisions lifted for vacant land located at 180 Burnhamthorpe Road West. And that's the site right across from Square One Mall. The site will be intensified through the condominication of 1,191 apartment units. So throughout the region of Peel, we continue to see steady infill and greenfield development as Caledon, Mississauga, and Brampton focus on achieving their density targets as set out in the Region of Peel official plan and the growth plan. So this concludes the development application and policy review updates. Thank you for listening, and sending it back to you, Chair Crocker.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hanson. That's a very detailed report. I'll be surprised if there aren't some questions. Does anybody have a question? I guess you just did your job too very well. Thank you very much. So I will ask for a motion to receive the application status update. Trustee Sohi, would you do that?
Yes, Trustee Crocker. Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Controller Chung, you have the tender activity report and the vandalism activity report. So we'll start with 9.3, tender activity report.
Thank you, Chair Crocker, and through you. You have before you the tender activity report from May the 1st to July 31st, 2022. Glad to take any questions.
Are there questions on 9.3, tender activity? I see none. Trustee Cameron, would you move receipt?
I will. Yes, sir.
Thank you. All in favor? That is carried. Moving to 9.4, the vandalism activity report. Controller Chung again, please.
Thank you, Chair Crocker. And again, you have before your vandalism report for the month of April 2022, and glad to take any questions also.
Are there questions? I have one, but is there a question from another trustee? No, I will ask then, Controller Chung. I was astonished at the almost $7,000 in damage to windows at Arundel. That leaps off the page at one. Is there a backstory there that you can share, or?
We'll be glad to get in for more information, Chair Crocker, but usually when we get damages to this extent, it's oftentimes a pellet gun or some sort of instrument used to damage numerous windows, but we'll be glad to take that back and provide more information next meeting.
I expect that Trustee Brad McDonald would be interested in that as well. And I would hope that the police would have been on that. It would be a relief to hear that the perpetrator had been found, because that's kind of scary, frankly.
Yeah, the police station's right across the street.
Yeah, it is.
Right. Oh, Trustee McDonald, there he is.
Yeah,
Hi, Trustee.
good call.
So I asked on behalf.
Yeah.
Okay. Trustee McDonald, do you want to move that one?
Yes, please. Thank you.
All right. All in favor of receipt of the vandalism activity report, as unhappy news as it is? That is carried. I have no trustee motions for consideration introduced at a previous meeting. Am I right? Okay. Number 11, over the page, are there trustee notices of motion for discussion at the next meeting? I have heard of none. Is there anybody who has one now? Okay, I see none. So before we move to adjournment, I would like to thank everybody present and your fellow staff members who are not at this meeting for the extraordinary work which you've done over the summer months. A lot of education workers, it's assumed, to get their summers off, and they don't all. And a lot of the really, really important work in keeping our schools running and looking as great as they do as a result of the work of the people who are at their meeting and the staff that they supervise. So please pass along our thanks to them. I will make the observation, as I have before, as a former teacher, that I would go into my school the week before school started and think to myself, this is never going to be ready, because there's desks in the hall and the floors are still being stripped and waxed and all that kind of stuff. And it was always back together and looking ship shape. And that is true times 260 whatever workplaces we have. So please pass on our thanks. Finally is number 12 is a move to adjourn. Trustee Cameron, would you move adjournment, please?
Yes, sir, I will.
It's not debatable. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you very much. I hope to see you all next month.